The queen who bathed in blood, Emperor Napoleon, is one of history's most famous and infamous figures. The man who once controlled much of Europe was ultimately undone by strange, disgusting, painful and mysterious maladies that befell him during his exile on the island of Santa Elena in the Indian Ocean. What exactly did Napoleon die from, and what does his death have to do with his stomach? This is my channel, and today we are exploring Napoleon's mysterious death. Born in 1769 in the French colonial island of Corsica, Napoleon rose through the ranks of the military under the French Revolution and its successor, the First French Empire. His victories against European coalitions and reforms back in France made him popular both among the commoners and the nobility. At the height of his power, he crowned himself emperor, but success brought forth enemies and resentment. In 1814, after a series of humiliating defeats, Napoleon abdicated the throne and was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Italy, but he was back in France less than a year later, having escaped from Elba and having been greeted like a conquering hero by loyalists. For the next 6 years, Napoleon would wage war across Europe, defeating the Austrians, Russians, Prussians, and British. He even invaded Spain, though this campaign would be a decisive loss for the French. The tides of war would turn decisively against Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig in October of 1813. Fleeing to France, he would be forced to abdicate the throne again and go into exile in 1814. Though his first abdication had been accepted by the victorious Allies, his second had not. They wanted revenge. The victors forced him into exile on the remote island of Santa Elena in the Indian Ocean, about 4,000 miles from Paris. There he lived out his final years until his death on May 5, 1821. Now it's unclear why the Allies chose such a remote island for Napoleon's exile. Some say they hoped the isolation would prevent him from ever returning to Europe. Others say they just wanted to get rid of him as far away from France as possible, so he couldn't threaten the country. Whatever the reason, the choice of St. Helena proved fateful for Napoleon. Almost immediately upon arriving at St. Helena, Napoleon fell violently ill. He suffered from chills, sweats, stomach pains, vomiting and diarrhea. He was too weak to get out of bed for days. The symptoms came and went, but they never really left him. It was clear to his small entourage, which included his wife, his sister and his doctor, that he wasn't going to recover. And so Napoleon began to withdraw from the world, spending his last months playing backgammon with his sister and writing his memoirs. Then on May 5, 1821, Napoleon died in his sleep at 8 p.m., according to the clock in his room, or 10 p.m., according to the clock in London. That makes his death all the more mysterious. Though the circumstances surrounding his death were mysterious, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Napoleon's death was caused by stomach cancer. Well, that's at least what everyone thought. See, since ancient times, stomach ailments have carried a heavy social stigma. The stomach is where food is processed before being turned into blood and bone, so it follows that an unhealthy stomach could lead to an unhealthy person, and an unhealthy stomach was seen as a sign of moral turpitude, lust, or gluttony, and no one wanted to talk about those things, especially not the royal family. This is all the more true when it comes to Napoleon. The guy was already seen as a monster, an ambitious Corsican upstart who betrayed his own people by siding with the French against the Italians, who overthrew the established order in Europe and tried to establish an empire in the heart of Europe, who waged unending wars that destabilized the continent and plunged it into chaos. You can't really show weakness when you're the baddest guy on the block. And that goes double if you're trying to convince people that your empire is ordained by God. Plus, Napoleon was a notorious eater. He loved good food, and he loved it in abundance. After his defeat at Waterloo, he told his chef to throw out the inventory of food he had brought with him on the campaign, because he knew he wouldn't be needing it. If there's one thing that set Napoleon apart from many of his contemporaries, it was his attitude towards food. There was no dainty little finger sandwiches and cucumber tea for this guy. He was raised in a working-class family and worked as an artillery officer in the French Revolution, and his diet reflected his humble beginnings. For breakfast, he ate bread dipped in milk or vinegar. Lunch and dinner consisted of soup, meat, potatoes, and bread. He also loved game dishes like roasted wild boar with apples. He was fond of fish and seafood, and one of his favorite desserts was a simple syrup made from honey, water, and lemon peel. Even in exile, he continued eating like a king. His chef prepared meals consisting of turtle soup, boiled beef with vegetables, roast mutton, venison steaks, braised lamb shanks, omelettes, fried chicken, pastries, rice pudding, sweetbreads, and more. So when Napoleon became sick with stomach ailments, it was easy to conclude that his gourmet lifestyle caught up to him. This conclusion was bolstered by the fact that Napoleon's symptoms were consistent with stomach cancer. Stomach cancer also runs in families. His father had died from it, and one of his brothers also succumbed to it. So perhaps this was simply a case of bad luck. Maybe Napoleon was just destined to die from stomach cancer. But the story doesn't end there. See, when Napoleon's doctors performed an autopsy, they found something strange. They found a tumor, but it wasn't in his stomach. It was in his pancreas. And this wasn't stomach cancer. It was an extremely rare form of cancer known as a gastrinoma. This kind of cancer results in the stomach lining turning itself out, which then causes ulcers. And ulcers can cause massive amounts of bleeding. To this day, only about 1 in 10 million people develop this kind of cancer. It's unclear how long Napoleon had been suffering from it, but his symptoms first appeared in 1815. And by 1816, he was complaining daily of stomach pain. He might have had it for as long as 6 years, which would have been extremely painful for him. But how did this obscure and painful condition kill Napoleon? Strangely, it might have been his doctors who administered his death sentence. While Napoleon was in exile, he developed ulcers, which resulted in massive blood loss. This anemia weakened him to the point where he could barely walk. It was at this point that his doctors decided to treat him. Now, there was no effective treatment for stomach ulcers in 1821, but doctors had recently discovered that eating watermelon seeds could stop them from bleeding. So they ground up watermelon seeds and mixed them into Napoleon's meals. This might have helped, but the side effect of these seeds is that they're incredibly hard and they act as mild laxatives. Then, in February of 1821, Napoleon's doctors gave him a laxative called jalapeno oil, and in March, he was given mercury, which is known to increase the flow of bile, which in turn helps break down ulcers. However, he reacted badly to both. Not only did his diarrhea worsen, but he began to suffer from excruciating abdominal pain. It's unclear whether these treatments worsened his condition or whether he was just getting worse naturally. But either way, his doctors gave him more of the same. Throughout April, Napoleon got worse and worse until he eventually died. Whether Napoleon's death was hastened by his doctors or whether he would have died at the same time regardless, it's undeniable that his stomach ultimately betrayed him. The man who conquered most of Europe was undone by a microscopic rebellion within his own body. The irony is not lost on me. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I shall see you next time.